welcome back to the Women in Wellness podcast. We are so happy to have our team back. Dr. Mindy is back from her big dental adventure, and it's Dr. Caitlin and I, Dr. Sonia. So today, we're very excited. We're going to be talking about the thyroid. So last week, Dr. Caitlin and I talked a bit about hormones, and we all have our hormonal story, right? Every woman, no matter what we're doing, we're going out for tea, we're at the gym, whatever we're doing, somehow hormones comes up in the conversation. So this is such a key issue I think a lot of women are facing today, and sometimes they actually don't know that it's the thyroid. So I think maybe if we can kind of start off talking a bit about what that looks like and the difference between what adrenal symptoms look like and thyroid symptoms, because I think we're all pretty aware of what adrenal fatigue is. I think that's kind of common knowledge and common language these days, but a lot of people are getting that confused with the thyroid and what that looks like. So maybe if one of you want to start off by maybe just a typical person walking in to your office and what that looks like and what they're talking to you about and what the next steps would be, whether it's testing or what you look for, essentially.
Go ahead, Dr. Caitlin. You can start.
Alrighty. So thyroid symptoms, well, they can be confused with adrenal symptoms, or adrenal symptoms can be confused with thyroid symptoms or a thyroid problem. But many times women come in with a low functioning thyroid, meaning their TSH, and that's typically what the doctors or most doctors run, is TSH is high. So, 5.5 or higher. And ultimately, TSH tells us squat, because a low-functioning thyroid, actually, let's talk about what thyroid is first off. It's really the hormone that controls our ability to turn on and off DNA.
Everything.
Right? And I think is so important is every cell has a receptor site for a thyroid hormone. Like it impacts every part of your body, which is why understanding it is so important.
Yeah, I always tell patients, I'm like, it's what turns your engine on. And if you don't have it, it's not turning on.
Yeah. Well, and that's the unfortunate part, because you can come in with similar symptoms as like your friend or your sister, but it doesn't mean that you have the same problem or the same cause.
Yeah.
And so similar symptoms, and I'm sure you guys see this all the time, it's like brain fog, slow healing, cold hands and feet, cold body temperature, can't regulate it. Inability to lose weight, hair loss, constipation, brittle nails, and those are like the common ones that most women experience.
Yeah, depression.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
I actually think almost every woman who comes into my office says, I think I have a thyroid problem, right?
Yeah.
Like it's like a common thing, especially for women in their 40s, to be like, to walk around and go, oh yeah, it's got to be a thyroid problem, because they've tried everything, nothing's working. So then they just assume that the thyroid's not working.
Right. But then their labs are normal. Their TSH is fine.
Yeah. Right. Well, that's a good point that you made too with the TSH, because I don't know if we want to differentiate between hypothyroid and subclinical hypothyroid, because a lot of docs will look at 5.5 and above and say, okay, now you have a thyroid problem, but I see 2 and I'm thinking, okay, there's something going on, anything above 2, 2.5. So we kind of call it subclinical hypothyroid, where things are starting to slow down. But like you said, Dr. Caitlin, TSH doesn't tell us the whole picture. So what are some of the other things that we would be looking for?
Why don't we tell them what TSH is? Like, where does TSH come from?
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah.
Gosh, I have a lot of thoughts on TSH, because when I had my second son, my only son, but my second child, my thyroid went crazy, and I'd never had a thyroid problem before. And and I don't even remember back then if it was high or low, but my TSH was totally whacked. And they wanted to do radioactive iodine treatment on my thyroid to get it to calm down, because I was hyperthyroid. So I think and the reason I tell you the story is that I think what happened to me is that TSH is produced by comes from the pituitary, hypothalamus pituitary area, and that's the unprotected part of the brain. So I think one of the things that is important for people to understand, and what I try to teach my patients, is when you look at TSH, that's basically showing you toxins that are accumulating in the unprotected part of the brain. That's one way of looking at that number. And toxins like that are typically things like lead and mercury. I also think that glyphosate's accelerating that TSH number and destroying that as well. So I think when you say, well, what does TSH do? It's important for people to understand that it's coming from this unprotected part of the brain, and it initiates the whole cascade of the thyroid to the liver, to the gut, to the cell. Like, it initiates that whole cascade.
Yeah.
But it's really a sign. It can be a piece of the sign that there's something wrong with the brain.
Yeah.
Right.
I always see when TSH is off, didn't just happen yesterday. It's this long-standing problem, which had affected their T4, their T3, their reverse T3. The toxicity was going up there, and all of a sudden TSH is usually the last to go off. And by that point, when the medical doctors are looking at the TSH, we've already gone through those other stages where we can catch it before by looking at some of the other numbers. So it's a stimulating hormone, right? So it's stimulating the thyroid to produce T4. Which then needs to convert into T3 so the cells can actually use it and use that information.
Yeah, and one of the things that I like to tell patients all the time too is if your TSH is off, it doesn't necessarily mean that you have a problem with your thyroid hormones yet.
That's right.
So most of the time doctors go TSH is high, which means you're hypothyroid, so low functioning thyroid, so let's give you hormones.
Yeah.
When TSH is low, it means you're hyper, and that's usually when they want to kill off the thyroid. So whether they do radioactive treatment, they remove it, they want to slow down how much your thyroid is producing. And so, finding out what is going on, why is the TSH high, is so important. And just like Dr. Mindy said, it's usually an accumulation of toxins that have built up in the pituitary. And a key thing that is kind of important, the pituitary not only controls the thyroid, but it also communicates with the adrenals. And so I don't know about you guys, but I'm sure you guys see this all the time, where the longer somebody's had symptoms or problems, the more likely they are to have an issue with both the adrenals and the thyroid. They may have started off with one or the other, but eventually it ends up affecting both. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I see that in every picture. My mom's actually the perfect example. She, started off with allergies and asthma, on prednisone, adrenals went off, and all of a sudden thyroid's off. So now she's not only on asthma medication, she's also on thyroid for, life, as they would say. But I see it always goes hand in hand. Absolutely.
I think the thing that's confusing about hormones in general is that you can't look at them as individual, or the endocrine system is not individual players. They all play together. Yeah. And so trying to fix one and saying you have a problem and I'm going to give you levothyroxine and it's going to solve all your problems is so erroneous, because there's so many other players that have to be addressed. And the same thing with adrenal. Throwing an adrenal supplement at an adrenal patient may not be the solution, because there's a team there that has to be addressed. Yeah. And that's where I think people get stuck.
Well, and I think that's why so many individuals, so women mainly, women are ones who are affected by thyroid conditions far more than men. But I have women who come in who've been working with, natural doctors, whoever it may be, for years, and they still don't see any alleviation in their symptoms. Yeah. And when you go back and you start looking at the previous labs, you go, well, nobody actually ran the appropriate labs to find out why your thyroid is malfunctioning. Yeah. So what are some of the labs? So if somebody goes in, or they go, I think there's something wrong with me, because truthfully, that was me 10 years ago. I was like, I have to have a thyroid problem. Right. I have no concentration, no memory. My energy is tanked, like absolutely no desire to work out whatsoever. I was having bowel movement problems. Like, I wasn't having normal bowel movements on a daily basis. Classic symptoms of a thyroid problem. Yeah. Well, went in, got the insurance test done, right? So what insurance will cover. And nope, everything's fine. Right. Your TSH is fine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So what should somebody go and look for when they have all of the classic symptoms of a thyroid problem, yet everything is quote unquote fine?
Yeah. Yeah, I would not just do TSH, but definitely looking at free T3, free T4, reverse T3, looking at all your antibodies as well, and testing the adrenals to see what the adrenals are doing. And to go even deeper than that, I would now am running heavy metal tests on anyone that has those complaints to, like, again, address that toxicity issue to see if that's what's targeting the thyroid. And like you said, even if, something is off, it doesn't necessarily mean it's the thyroid that's the issue. Right? It's something else that's contributing. Like, I usually use like a triangle where I'm like, thyroid is here, adrenals, and here over here is ovaries. So everything is communicating to each other. And like, like the king is sitting on the throne, the pituitary gland is communicating with all of it. So you don't just look at that one aspect. So you have to test multiple things to get to the root.
Yeah, and we do very similar where I look at it like all the tests you just mentioned. Plus, I think it's really important to know what's going on with the liver, because you got to go, T4 has to go to the liver to be converted into T3. Right. It also has to go to the gut. Yeah. So doing like a stool test and understanding what's going on in the gut is incredibly important. So we typically, same thing on almost all of our thyroid patients, will run the tests you mentioned, plus a blood analysis looking at liver enzymes, and then we'll look at gut, and then we'll look at heavy metals. And then, you can kind of sit back and go, okay, here's a really complete picture of the whole team working together.
Yeah, I'm very similar to you guys. When somebody comes in, I'm looking at 10 thyroid markers. So that does include the antibodies, because unfortunately, 80% of women that have a hypothyroidism or a low functioning thyroid actually have what's called Hashimoto's. And Hashimoto's is the autoimmune condition, meaning your thyroid is victim to your immune system, right? Your immune system's breaking down the thyroid. And so that gives you a totally different picture, an immune system problem versus a thyroid problem. And I know you guys know this, there could be 20 possible different causes for a low functioning or a high functioning thyroid.
Absolutely.
And so just to throw, levothyroxine or Armour or Synthroid at you doesn't actually address the 20 different possible causes for this low functioning thyroid. Do one of you guys want to talk about the difference between T4 and T3 and reverse T3? Because I think that's so important. And most people don't even know what reverse T3 is. They're like, what? Huh?
Yeah.
There's a reverse?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you how I explain it to my patients is that in the most simplistic term, TSH gets secreted from the pituitary. It goes and stimulates the thyroid. The thyroid, it will secrete 90% of what it secretes is T4. It does a little bit of T3. And then another interesting topic would be it secretes calcitonin, which can affect osteoporosis and things like that. But that T4 it's pretty much no use to you until it goes to the liver and to the gut to get converted into T3, and then T3 goes into the cell, and boom, you have magic. That's what I say.
That's where the action happens.
Yeah, I love it. The engine.
Yeah.
So then the engine's working, right? So there are some key markers like reverse T3. If we see that reverse T3 is high, we know that body's under adrenal fatigue. It's under adrenal stress, and that it's got a crisis it's dealing with. And when your body is got a lot of reverse T3, you're not making as much T3 to make it active to the cells. Yeah. So that tells me that there is an adrenal issue that needs to be handled. That's the way that I look at reverse T3. How about you?
Similar, explaining it with like T4 having to convert. And I also talk about the things that T4 relies on to make sure that conversion happens, like the right amounts of certain minerals like zinc and selenium. Selenium being important because mercury has an affinity for selenium and will deplete the body of that. Yeah. So when, there's toxicity, the conversion isn't happening. When there's stress, when cortisol is high, it's going to stop that conversion and increase the reverse T3, because that reverse T3 is a very protective mechanism. It's protecting the body, it's shutting down metabolism, it's shutting down the engine so that it can focus on, creating more balance in the immune system. So it takes me back to that rushing woman syndrome again. Because when we're in that survival state, reverse T3 is going to be high because it thinks it has to protect us. So it goes back to that stress levels, all of that toxicity. It all has a play in creating that reverse T3. And the key thing I think for people to understand is that reverse T3 and T3 are mirror images. So the brain gets tricked. It thinks, oh, we have a lot of T3. I don't need to produce any more TSH. So your TSH will show up normal, even though you don't have enough T3 to rev up your engine. It's because you have high reverse T3. So just kind of taking it back to that as well. Yeah.
You know what's interesting, and I love this. I think a conversation to have at some point is that we do not live in a time where it's like you have this symptom, this is the pill you should take. You have this problem here. I mean, just listening to you is like, there are so many different things it could be, and this is there needs to be like a name for it, like customized healthcare or. But this idea that you have a thyroid problem and you show up and you get the typical thyroid treatment is so mistaken. And you could take that, you could say that to for every single condition out there. Like you were saying, do you have heavy metals causing your selenium to be low? And do you have, where's your gut? I think that's what's probably so confusing for everybody.
Yeah.
But
and it's frustrating.
Super frustrating.
Totally.
And the other thing too, just to piggyback on what you were saying, Dr. Sonia, whenever I see high reverse 3, I also think possible infection, like long-term infection, chronic infection, that there might not be symptoms of. So most people think infection like in the gut, you have to have cramping, constipation, diarrhea, bloating. No, not at all. Or like to have a bladder infection, you have to have burning sensation when you urinate. Not at all. There could be an infection going on that your body's still trying to get rid of. And so it's so important to figure out what the heck is going on. And one of the best ways, so that mirror image, that's a great image, especially for people who have a chemistry background, right? Like you can think of isomers, but everybody can picture back in the day when we had 2 different keys for the car, one to open the door and one to start the ignition. They would both fit in each lock per se, but they wouldn't work if it was the wrong key, meaning if you put the key that opens the door in the ignition, it would fit, but it won't turn it on. And it's the same thing with thyroid. So T3 and reverse T3, they both fit in the T3 receptor site, but only T3 turns on the cell, turns on your ignition. Reverse T3 just sits there. And it takes up that spot so that that cell can't turn on. And that's why so many women have the symptoms despite being on medications. So I don't know about you guys, but I pretty much see most thyroid women on some form of T4 hormone replacement. But what happens if the reason your thyroid isn't working is because you're not converting T4 into T3? You don't have enough T3. So you can take T4 every day, all day, have massive amounts of it, but you're still going to feel terrible because your body can't utilize it.
And I've done a lot of, go ahead.
No, and therein lies the frustration that so many people have, and they're taking it, and then the doctor's testing just TSH, saying you're normal,
you're fine,
and they're like,
it. It's working.
It's so frustrating.
The second solution, however, ends up being T3 therapy, but that can also do the same thing because yes, we can give you T3, you feel good now, like your energy is up, all your hair is not falling out, things are getting better, but you're still not getting to the root cause still. If there's an infection, I don't know if you guys have seen this. I've seen a huge correlation between history of mono and Hashimoto's.
Epstein-Barr,
Epstein-Barr, that's huge.
Interesting.
And unfortunately for me, I can't get that tested here, and the doctors won't test it. But we definitely can pay privately. But I've seen a huge correlation between that. So, like you were saying, Dr. Caitlin, infection.
It's huge. It's. I don't want to say it's a guarantee, but I can pretty much assume that when somebody has a low functioning thyroid, that there's going to be some form of underlying infection. Epstein-Barr is one of the most common. Another one that's popping up a lot is Lyme.
A lot.
Lyme.
So do you test it? Do you test infections then? Or you can't test for it, Dr. Sonia, but Dr. Caitlin, do you test for it?
Yeah, we'll test for infections. And I might not dive right into like the Epstein-Barr antibodies to see if that's present, but I absolutely run a complete CBC panel to see what the white blood cells are doing. You know, are they super active? Are they depressed? What is the breakdown of our white blood cells? Like, is there a bacterial pattern? Is there a viral pattern? Is there a parasite pattern?
Yeah.
Is there a little bit of everything going on? And then that'll cause me to dive deeper. It'll give me more of a direction. Right. So I'll then run, like you said, Dr. Mindy, like a stool panel to find out, okay, what's going on in the gut?
Right.
Because you can pretty much guarantee an infection is going to be in the gut, and the gut's where your immune system is, and you got to get that handled. So we do try and figure out, okay, what's causing this? Because if, like you said, Dr. Sonia, you can take T3 and you might start to feel good. But what happens if you're taking T3 yet you still have so much reverse T3 that, you know, eventually that thyroid medication is going to reach its max and you're not going to feel so good anymore.
Yeah, you're going to hit a plateau. And I see that a lot 6 months after. They're like, well, I'm feeling like the way I did before. I'm like, yes, because we have to address the root. Or else it will come back.
Let's talk about some like what kind of strategies you guys give, because I know that we all have had really good success with thyroid. So identifying it is really important. But I'm kind of curious to hear if we are all doing very similar strategies, because I think there's something we probably each have a little different twist on it.
Yeah, it always comes back to detox. Right. I actually just saw one of my patients who I've been seeing for years, a young woman in university, and her antibodies were 189 and we got them down to 35.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's the other thing too. I think a lot of people think once they're diagnosed with Hashimoto's or some sort of autoimmune that it's like a life sentence, but really it isn't if you use the right tools. So with her, it was a lot of detoxification and stress management. She was a student living on her own. Family was, you know, on the East Coast, and a lot of work with that, the mind-body stuff for her. And also I realized there was an infection. So treating that as well was kind of key. And that, that seemed to shift things for her.
Yeah. I mean, what about you, Dr. Caitlin?
Well, everybody's so different. And so depending on what is driving that individual, after I know the testing, there's always a dietary change. So I know this is going to sound repetitive, guys out there, but switching to organic is so important because those glyphosates, just like you mentioned before, Dr. Mindy, they're just going to keep driving toxins deeper and deeper. And if we're constantly affecting the pituitary gland, so this to me is the master controller. It controls everything. And as soon as that goes down, you end up with a plethora of symptoms, not right away. It's a slow going process. But if you don't get those glyphosates out, you're constantly like stimulating it to be agitated and irritated. So one of the first thing I tell our patients to do is organic. And then, you know, when you eat protein, which we tell our patients to eat protein, animal protein, you know, try and do it so that it's organic, hormone-free, pasture-raised, because like we mentioned the other day, animals have their own set of hormones. And so if you're eating animals that have been further injected with more hormones, it's just going to constantly throw your system off and out of balance. Now you can mitigate the cost by eating less of the protein. So instead of, you know, having a T-bone steak to yourself, split it or have it in 2 meals and load up on the organic veggies. That will really help bring the cost down of food. But that's one of the big things that we do. And on top of huge liver detox, get the GI tract moving so that toxins don't redistribute, you don't re-intoxify, or did I say that right? And so those are probably the common things that I do with everybody, other than using specific supplements to address where the dysfunction is for that individual. How about you, Dr. Mindy?
Yeah, no, I think I very much in alignment with you guys. I think toxins first, and then I think my brain always goes to, okay, we got to detox this person, especially heavy metals. I mean, I know you guys, we all use very similar protocols, and it's amazing how that has an effect on the thyroid. So, I mean, so many people have gotten off their medication just from doing the heavy metal detoxing alone. But then lately have been really trying to work with people from a gut perspective. And like everything you said, Dr. Caitlin, where you got to pull all this stuff out, I think what's really exciting for people to realize is that there's a lot of cool things you can add in as well that will feed good bacteria in your gut that will help you build a more regulated immune system to turn off the Hashimoto's. So I do a lot of fermented foods, and we talked about this, I think, before, the fermented foods, the polyphenol foods, the prebiotic foods like chia seeds, and trying to give people some ideas around not just, oh, we're going to detox you and we're going to pull all these things out, but that there's also some, as my patients call it, the fun foods. We get to add some of these fun foods in. And I think a good balance of the two of those are really, really important.
Yeah. Well, and that adding the good stuff in is how you maintain, right?
Right.
So once we remove all that stuff out, I'm pretty sure you guys are all on the same page. Whenever somebody comes in to work with us, we want to teach them what to do to maintain a healthy life. I don't want them to absolutely need me to tell them day by day what they have to do. You know, and it's going back to doctor. Yeah, doctor means educator. You know, your doctor's not teaching you. Well, that's a problem in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the same thing. It's like coaching them along and teaching them what we know so that they can start to read their own body and know what it needs to re-inoculate, to create that microbiome that's, you know, flourishing. Yeah, that's huge.
Since Hashimoto's is the #1 cause for women with a low functioning thyroid, why is it that you guys feel most women are never tested for the antibodies?
Yeah, it's a great question.
Well, here it's a bit of a political thing. Even when the MDs are trying to get people tested, their patients tested for like further thyroid testing, the lab themselves will cancel it. So yeah, so they will ask for T4, but if TSH is in the normal range, it's canceled. So they have to get it done privately. So here it comes down to a cost thing. Because in Canada, it works a little bit differently. People are used to getting healthcare covered. So when they're like, oh, well, I have to pay for the test, I'll just get my MD to run it. I'm like, okay, you can try. And even your MD will try, but the lab will cancel it. So here it's a little bit tricky, where it's not even us or sometimes not even the MD. They want it too, but it's the lab.
Dr. Mindy, what do you think is the cause here?
Do you want my uncensored opinion?
Absolutely.
I love it. Speak your mind.
So I don't know if I had told you guys this story, but when my kids were in elementary school, I was at a science fair with another mom who happened to be an OB. And she came up to me and who also happened to be overweight. And she came up to me and started asking me advice on how to lose weight. And I was kind of talking to her about nutrition and what we were doing in our clinic. And I said, are you finding a lot of women with like thyroid problems and hormone imbalances? And she goes, Mindy, I have a practice full of women like that. And I do not know what to do with them because my medical textbooks have failed me. And I was like, whoa, like that's, you know, she basically, the way I understood it, and later on we had more discussions about it, is that she isn't trained in understanding thyroid at a deeper level. They're trained at understanding TSH. And Hashimoto's is the new and emerging thing. And yet you've got these group of doctors that are so old school, they're stuck in that TSH mode. So I think I'm going to be as bold as to say it's lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think to add to that, it's not just lack of knowledge, it's lack of options to treat it.
Right? That too.
Because
that too. Right.
Yeah.
For most traditionally trained doctors, their option is your TSH is high, you need T4 hormone, you need T3 hormone. They don't so much care as to the why.
Yeah.
The problem is with Hashimoto's is a completely different ballgame than having a thyroid that's malfunctioning.
Yeah.
Right.
You got to address it differently. And so my personal opinion, and don't throw stones at me, it's just that they don't have another option, meaning it doesn't matter to them why your TSH is high. Your TSH is high, you get this med.
Yeah.
Right.
But when you start going after the cause or the root of the issue, that's when things differentiate and become so important to know where it's coming from. So if you want long-term results, you got to go after the cause, not just the symptom.
Yeah.
And the symptom is high TSH.
Yeah.
The symptom is low energy, hair falling out, brittle nails, dry skin, whatever else.
Yeah.
But you got to address the cause. And so in my opinion, that's why I might have 1 out of every 10, and I'm being real generous right now, hypothyroid women who have actually had their antibodies checked.
Yeah. No,
I
it's very
highly
rare.
doubt it's 1 out of every 10.
Yeah.
I love when they bring their blood work and I'm like, oh, wow, you went to a doctor that actually knows something.
Yeah.
Like, because
Yeah,
usually
I
it's
know. But it's like what you said, they don't have the tools
Mhm.
and they're not trained to deal with these chronic illnesses.
Right.
And something like you said has like the multiple layers, but they're just used to this is a symptom, this is what you do for the symptom, and that's kind of the end of the day. And they can't.
But that's, again, I'm going to get really politically incorrect here again, like shame on them. Like they need, if you've got an epidemic of people that have thyroid problems and you're operating off an old school system of measurement and you haven't added new measurements in because you don't have that tool, then go find some new tools.
Yeah.
And
Which I think some are, I think in their profession too, those that I've spoken to, they too are frustrated. And I mean, the way it works here, they have 10 minutes with the patient. They can't dive in like we can. And that's why, as people ask me, would you ever want to be under MSP? And I was like, no, I need this hour. I need this hour and a half. I need time to actually get to know my patient to see what the deeper issue is.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I agree. Yeah. And if you talk to most MDs, DOs in the system, they will say flat out that they are amazing with catastrophic care.
Yes.
Right? Acute.
Oh, yeah.
Something that happens, absolutely amazing. And thank God we have medications and surgeries and things like that for it. The problem lies when we have these chronic conditions, chronic diseases, whether it be hypothyroidism, an immune condition like
fibromyalgia.
Yeah, diabetes, all of these things, they fall short because they don't have the tools to address it. So think about it. We just said that a thyroid problem could come from a liver dysfunction. Is there a medication that your doctor can prescribe you for a liver dysfunction? And the answer is no.
No.
Right? Statins or, take the caffeine out, take the alcohol out, we'll watch your enzymes, and if it gets bad, we'll give you a liver transplant.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, well, great. So
go ahead. I'm just chomping at the bit here. Go ahead.
Nope. Chomp.
No, I heard a nutritionist speak on a podcast the other day that I thought who gave a really interesting analogy. And he was telling a story about 2 lions where they had lions in captivity, and they started to notice that the lions in captivity were getting diseases they don't see in lions that live in the wild.
Right.
And so they tried to mimic the exact food that the lions in the wild were eating. They gave to them in captivity to see if that would help with the disease, and it did not. These captive lions were still getting the same diseases, regardless if it was the mimicked food as to what they got into the wild. And the moral of that story was that because they're in captivity, the lion body was not meant to be in a captive environment. Okay, so now let's go to the human body. The human body is not meant to live in the amount of air, water, pollution that we have. We're not meant to eat the chemicals that we're eating. We're not meant to be in the sedentary world that we are. So we have to go back to what does the human body need? And what majority of people are doing is not what the human body needs.
No, it's the complete opposite. Yeah, absolutely. And that I love that analogy because it is, somebody in captivity, that as if we are feeling that now, those stress hormones and all those things, that is also part of the bigger picture. It's not just that one singular thing with the food, right? There's so many different layers to it. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, so even if you look at it from a gut perspective, which is the Hashimoto's, if we were eating out in our environment We'd be eating more seeds and nuts, and we'd be getting, if we were, we wouldn't be in cars, we'd be walking, and we'd be going to different, we'd be on the plains, and we'd be up in the mountains, and we'd be having different exposure to different variety.
Yeah, the elements.
So yeah, something as simple as making sure your variety of fruits and vegetables is continually mixed up and different. And, there are some things that when you stop and you go, what would the human body need? Like being out in sunlight, it needs to get out into sunlight. Movement, the body needs to move. Those kind of things are like so like simple, and everybody could follow it. You just have to realize that the environment you're in is not what the human body wanted to be. So hence the organs malfunctioning.
Yeah.
Well, and I just think too, chronic stress that women are under these days, like running a house, keeping the house clean, keeping your kids alive and fed, and going to work, and traffic, and grocery shopping, and bills.
All of that. Yeah.
We're under this constant state of stress, constant. And our body's not meant for that. We're meant for periods of stress, like we're out in the wild and a bear, we run into a mama bear and her cubs. Woo! Okay, let's go. Let's get that adrenaline going so we can get out. But then as soon as we're away from danger, we're supposed to go back to a calm state. If we're not in a calm state, one, we're not digesting food. Two, we don't have proper circulation. Three, our hormones are not being produced properly.
No, we're not regenerating.
Right. And so we have to go back and take time for ourselves. We are worth it.
Yes.
Yep.
So what are some of the things other than like the organic and I think first off, changing your diet and doing some of reducing the toxic load that your body's under, try that first.
Yeah, agreed.
Get appropriate testing done. But what are some of the ways that women can de-stress? So going back to some tools that they can maybe implement really quickly, because I find most of my hypothyroid women are extremely stressed out.
Yeah, I think it goes back to the basics. Really go outside, and make it a conscious effort. Make it a 40-day challenge. Do something to kind of shift the pattern that's already been created. So give yourself 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, half an hour if you can. Just go outside for a walk. Bundle up if you have to. I live in Canada and it's cold. We go outside. Make it a priority. The vitamin D. I mean, we don't get much vitamin D here, but that fresh air and you need to be outside.
You know what I've been trying to do is also, because I love the idea that there's good bacteria everywhere. So when I go for a run, I go for around a rose garden that's in front of my house. And I live in California, so it's maybe wait till summertime. But I take my shoes off when I'm done at the end of the run, and I just walk through the grass for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I try to purposely go out in the sun when I go to run. I don't try to hide from the sun. I think those are simple things that can have, if you do them repetitively, it's not like you can go out in the sun and be like, oh my God, my thyroid problem is solved. But
every day, daily.
Yeah. But just those little simple steps. And then I would agree with you, Dr. Caitlin, like hands down, the number one food choice you need to make is you go organic. Like we have to stop eating chemicals. We have to get all the chemicals out.
And getting a bit more specific with autoimmune and Hashimoto's, get rid of the gluten. I mean, get rid of the grains, but really, number one, get rid of the gluten.
Yeah.
Yep. Maybe one of these days we can talk about grains and other things that mimic gluten. So you could be on a gluten-free diet, but you still feel like crap.
Yeah.
And the other thing,
that was me. I did that for a long time.
I hear this all the time too. Well, there's gluten-free bread out there. Okay, just because it says gluten-free doesn't mean it's healthy.
Yeah, they put other stuff in there to make it taste good, not like cardboard. So,
So I know this might sound crazy, and if you guys have kids and everything, oh, my kids won't eat it. No, they will. They just have to develop the taste for more vegetables, and you can make vegetables taste amazing.
My kids eat veggies every
put butter
day.
on them.
Load them up with fat.
Avocado, cashew cream. There's so many ways. There's so many ways of giving them veggies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I agree everything with you guys said. This weekend, I was actually supposed to fly East Coast for a seminar. Flight got canceled because of the bad weather out on the East Coast. And so we decided to go camping on Lopez, our favorite little island in the San Juans. Yeah. And it wasn't super warm, don't get me wrong, but every single day, me and the Black Lab went out on a hike. She went swimming in the ocean, being around the ocean and the negative ions.
Getting in. Oh, yeah.
It was just, I was so happy and so grateful. And so now I just feel so rejuvenated. So getting out and doing something you love, and it doesn't have to be expensive, just get outside.
I love that.
Yeah.
Walking through the woods. If it wasn't freezing, I would have walked around barefoot in the woods.
Yeah.
Have you heard that the science behind forest bathing, that the pine needles at the bottom of a sequoia tree actually has an immune capability as the needles fall down, and it's the ones at the base of the tree give off an immune component. So you want to take your shoes off and actually stand. You know how the pine needles like add up? You want to actually stand on those ones right near the tree.
Well, Pacific Northwest, we have tons of those.
I know.
Oh my God. Vacuuming those out of my house for my dog trampling them. So now I know just to go stand at the base of my trees.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, it's called forest bathing. Go look it up. It's really interesting study.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah.
Cool.
So much to talk about with the thyroid. Just touching on Dr. Mindy, you talking about your pregnancy. I mean, that's a whole other show that we can do about pregnancy and the thyroid and things that change and the hormones that change and the after effects.
Yeah. And you know what? I thank God I was so committed to breastfeeding, because the one thing that I didn't know everything I know now. Yeah. But I was committed to breastfeeding. So they're like, and you'll have to stop breastfeeding. And I'm like, well, you can retest me. My son was like 4 months old. I'm like, you can retest me 2 years. When I decide to stop breastfeeding, then we'll see. Yeah. But thank God, because they were like, you've got a problem and we need a radioactive, shoot it.
Yeah, well, good for you being your advocate. So that's what we want to teach everyone. Be your own advocate.
Yeah, and actually it's a good point when you go into these appointments with medical doctors. I think it's really important to know where your line in the sand is and what you're willing to do, and what knowing ahead of time going in. Like, I'm going to go in, I'm going to get information, but I don't want to go on antibiotics. Or I'm going to go in, I'm going to get information, and if they don't get me the blood tests I want, I'm going to go somewhere else and get those blood tests. Yeah. Absolutely. So I think we're used to going into the medical doctor and just kind of passively sitting back. And I think you don't have to be aggressive, but you can go in with an intention of what you want to get out of the appointment. And then if that doesn't happen, you got to go look for other sources and piece it together.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I think it's so important to ask why. When they suggest something, why?
Yeah.
What is this going to do? How long am I going to have to do this? What is the outcome going to be?
Yeah.
How are we going to test it down the road? How are we going to know if it's working or isn't? What are my other options? Yeah. And so before jumping on anything, especially if it doesn't feel right, think about it.
Yeah.
I think that's the big thing. Unless the doctor is going to say, we're going to dive in, we're going to find out the why, and then we're going to customize a program to address you, start asking why.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Why?
And when they say you have to go on this medication for life, find out there's a reason. You haven't solved your problem. There's a reason you're on the medication.
Question it all. Question.
Yeah. It's good advice.
One quick thing before we end. One of my patients is a medical doctor. And
amazing.
Oh yeah. She is so funny. She goes, I'm not going to lie. I didn't think you were going to know what the hell you were talking about. But she is off her thyroid medication.
Nice.
She's not pre-diabetic.
Amazing.
She is feeling amazing. And she's so funny because she goes into like support groups because she's retired and she lives in a small town, like a small community. And so it's very much interaction, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we'll get an email right after her meeting going, these people don't know what the hell is going on.
Huh.
Right. You're right. I'm like,
he's been converted. Yeah.
Maybe you should share, like tell them that there's other things. like how
Absolutely.
important diet is.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh, they won't
Mhm.
listen. I'm like, you don't know.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That
Yeah.
I had that same exact thing with the woman, the OB I told you about, is a couple of years after that conversation, she was pre-diabetic and was about to be put on metformin. And then she reached out to me and she said, I'm trying to do everything I can. Can you give me diet advice? So I did, and she dropped a bunch of weight. She didn't have to go on the medication, and she sent me this like, hallelujah, this is great.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, go educate your people. Like, go
Yeah.
tell your people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was like, it's hard. They don't listen, Mindy.
Yeah. 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 Because, they have an expectation of that doctor too. And what, the
Right.
patient also has an expectation of what they're going to get. So I think what you guys said before is key. Ask the questions and also have your own intention.
Yeah.
Like, what is it that you want? Do you
Right.
want to get off of these medications?
Yeah.
Like there's, like I said, so many layers and depth
Yeah.
to every diagnosis.
But I think if you go into the appointment and you have the intention of what you want out of that appointment, you won't come out frustrated. We batted around a lot of different thoughts today, and I think what's important is go in and get more extensive testing. And if you can't, then you got to come out and you got to find somebody that will do those tests. You got to have a nutrition plan. There's a lot. We gave you a ton of suggestions today. So come out and then regroup and know what you need to do next.
Totally.
But don't lose hope.
Yeah.
Please don't lose hope, because the three of us are seeing people heal from thyroid problems all the time.
Absolutely. There's always it's my parents' 40th anniversary this week, and I was thinking about the speech that I was going to give. And sometimes parents give advice that you think you're not taking in, but you realize after, wait, my whole career is based on this. And one thing that I always heard my dad say was, there's a solution to every problem. Who he was talking to, there's a solution to every problem. So you have a problem or a diagnosis or something going on with you, there is a solution. You just have to ask the right questions and get the right people on your team. So I think that's a good takeaway from this call today, really is be your own advocate, ask the questions, get the right people on your team, go organic, get rid of the grains and the gluten, right? So many
Get out in the sun.
Get out in the sun, take your shoes off, right by the tree. Yeah, exactly. Get the fresh air. Yeah. So cool. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, and one other thing, back to traditional doctors, medical doctors, don't get frustrated with them, because a lot of them, like Dr. Sonia said, your insurance dictates a lot of what they can and can't do. And so if your doctor can't run certain tests, it's not that they don't necessarily want to. Maybe it is that they don't, but it usually comes down to insurance doesn't cover it. And insurance won't cover something if it doesn't change the treatment program for you. So understand that insurance, no matter where you are, Canada, United States, it's like car insurance. It's there if we have a catastrophe, but it's not there to do oil changes, tire rotations, new windshield wipers. Like, it's not maintenance. It's not to get you back to your good old 20-year-old self. It's like patch and repair work as we go through. So the reason I brought that up was, don't get so mad at your doctor. You just have to go, like Dr. Mindy said, and look for somebody that's going to do something a little different. Just be prepared, though, to do something different when you go see somebody that does things differently.
And then also don't walk out of there and be frustrated, and don't take this is the best you're ever going to get as a diagnosis or as a prognosis. That's not a prognosis. So
Great.
Cool.
Well, for next time, what I would actually love to hear is the dental stuff. If you guys going over that, unless there's something else you want to talk about before, but I feel like both of you have a bit of a journey to share. Which awesome.
I would love to. I'd love to chat about, Dr. Caitlin, you are the dental expert, and I will tell you what the journey I'm learning. But I think the most important thing for people to know is that the health of your mouth, oh my God, it can be a toxic trap, or it can be the greatest gift you give your body. So I think it's important that people understand what to look for in dental care. That would be really important.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yes.